Welcome to The Gab, brought to you by the Independent Press Award. This is Gabby Olzak. Joining me is David B. Whitacre, author of The 7 Gifts, distinguished favorite of the 2022 Independent Book Award and the 2021 New York City Big Book Award for Mind, Body, Spirit. Congratulations, David, and welcome to The Gab.
Thank you so much. It's exciting to be here with you.
Thank you. So you know what? Let's dive right in. You quoted Socrates, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." David, explain what the 7 gifts are and how this quote relates to them.
Well, the 7 gifts is, in my view, an astonishing piece of historical information that essentially explains all of humanity in spiritual terms. It's a way of explaining and understanding why people do what they do, their central core inner motivation, and the notion that the beginning of wisdom involves understanding oneself. I thought was an apropos way to open the gift story. It's also a way of unlocking deep internal mysteries, as well as unlocking understanding of others around us.
So David, you've met a lot of very interesting people along the way, I have to say. During your journey, what led you to discover the 7 gifts and also become a giftologist, which is a term that you actually coined? So what have these experiences, how has it led you to that?
Well, I tried to use just good old-fashioned American storytelling to bring the gifts to life, and also to share, at least in terms of my own path in life. It has involved a very large spectrum of different economic classes, educational classes, cultural classes, ethnicities, races, etc. And so I feel like I have a pretty large, broad overview of different types of people, which has also enabled me, when I first was introduced to the 7 gifts, to realize that those patterns were replete throughout all of those spectrums. I learned of the 7 gifts in a class approximately 25 years ago, the core ideas, and realized that when I was first seeing it, that it was something very extraordinary. I've studied other types of personality typing systems in my academic life, and was able to see pretty quickly that this was a very unique set of information. So over the next 20 or 25 years, I simply embarked on a self-study protocol to try to visualize and observe things in nature and in humanity, to expand my awareness of that information and to try to add to it. So I would say about half of what I share in the book regarding the 7 gifts was passed on to me, and the other half were things that I learned through observation over a period of years.
So you mentioned, David, you mentioned personality types. How are the 7 gifts different than, let's say, a personality type or a zodiac sign?
I discuss in the book, different types of personality systems, Jung's archetypes. I believe Shakespeare used personality typing systems as well. There's Myers-Briggs, zodiac signs, enneagrams, etc. The issue that I find that's problematic with those systems is that they attempt to sort really an unimaginable amount of behavior, human behavior, which is obviously complex. The difference between those personality typing systems and the 7 gifts is the 7 gifts speak to inner motivation or core motivation. It's a way of understanding why people do what they do, not necessarily what they do. In other words, you could have, for example, 3 different people who have 3 different gifts, and they could all be doing the same thing, but doing things for entirely different motivations or different reasons. So I argue in the book that understanding someone's gift and identifying their gift can frequently give you more insights into that person than they might have about themselves, and also quite a bit about people that you've just met without them knowing that you know all that about them. I argue that there's no faster way to get to the core of someone's inner being or their soul, if you will, other than through the gifts.
Okay, so all that you just said, I have about a million questions to ask you based on that. So I actually took the quiz, and I couldn't wait to take it. And it turns out I'm a prophet.
Nice.
I don't know if you were able to discern that from our brief encounters together, but I am. And my daughter, Lila, is very interested in anything of the spiritual realm. So I was discussing it with her, I told her of the quiz, said that I'm a prophet, and she said, "Oh, you're a Libra." That's a Libra, that right there. But I would agree with what you said. I find the seven gifts to be obviously much more spiritual than the zodiac, and also any type of personality trait. And you also said that it is possible to possess a combination of the gifts. I think I have a combination because I was definitely a prophet, but I had about three others that were really right behind it.
Oh, that's great. I had you down to two by watching and listening to a couple of your previous works that you did with other authors. I had you down to two.
Okay.
And prophet was one of them.
Aha.
And I'm so glad to hear too that you can also see the application of that, especially with your daughter. The information is so powerful and so accurate that, for example, I stopped looking at resumes 10 years ago. If I want to hire a person for this function, I'll look for that gift, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a natural battery source that never runs out of juice. I do think that knowledge of the gifts can apply in many different areas of our society, and in business, in counseling, in healthcare. But if I had to pick, what I think is the single biggest application of it, it's child rearing.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, understanding your child's gift unlocks a completely different way of understanding information. I had a discussion with a client, a difficult discussion with a client yesterday in my bill paying job. And because I knew what the client's gift was, I was able to say things in a manner that could register with how he's built and constructed. And as a result, he could hear me. I do argue in the book that there is only one central core gift, and it never changes.
Right.
Much like an operating system that's installed at the factory, that central gift organizes everything else that takes place inside of us. However, for example, when I took the gift test, I scored as an organizer off the charts. And then the gift that showed up underneath that at the time was an exhorter. If I take the gift test now, again, the organizer is off the charts, but the second gift that shows up underneath it is yours. I've evolved through the years and changed, and the one that shows up underneath that is yours. I do think that it's important to understand the gifts, not only as a means, again, of understanding other people, but also to be able to grow internally, to be able to understand that there are natures outside of my own that I can adapt to, that I can understand, that I can imitate, that I can do my best impression of. I might look at a set of circumstances that I'm in and say, well, what would a prophet do? What would a server do? And that can help inform new and better ways of growing and of communicating and connecting with people. And
well, you certainly lay it out in a really clear and concise way. This is definitely a guide that I would recommend that readers can use to not only determine their own gifts, but to discover others' gifts. But what are other ways, other than reading the book, which I highly recommend, that you would that people can just find out, let's say, their child's gift? How would we discover that?
I think the first, is to try to read the book. I do think that it's important because, as you know, the book lays out the light side of the gift and the dark side of the gift.
Yes.
So it does give very specific language, very specific concepts in terms of things to understand our special abilities and unique abilities that the other gifts don't have, things to lean into, so to speak, and also think dark parts that people would be wise to watch out for. And sometimes just by reading those things, perhaps as you did when you read the book, you start to think, that's Frank, that's Larry, that's
yes.
Carla. Yeah, this explains why mom is acting the way she is. So I do think it's important to dive into it. I think the information is important enough to dive into. I think it's something that people can use for the rest of their God-given lives.
I agree.
But the other way to access it is we did develop on the website a gift quiz so that could be publicly available without reading the book. The website address is www.7gifts.com. That's spelled out. So there is a gift quiz there as well. We also are putting up a YouTube so that people can just hear my voice reading the gift questions rather than having to read them using cognitive skills.
That's the one that I used, and I did like that. That was really, really helpful. In the book, you also say, David, that the 7 gifts put all of us squarely on the same level playing field. What do you mean by that?
Well, it means that a convicted felon can have the same gift as Warren Buffett. It means that across the arc of humanity, that all of us, regardless of our station in life and where we are, our background, our country of origin, our personal histories, that all of us fall distinctly and squarely into one of those 7 gifts. So
interesting.
Yes, so you can, and again, that's why I tried to lay out the book in the way that I did. With all due respect to any other writers, I don't like self-help books. I've kind of been there, done that. I'm not a fan of them at this point. So what I tried to do in the book was just use the tradition of good old-fashioned American storytelling.
Yes, and you did indeed.
To try to bring the gifts to life in a way that was fun.
So how do you suggest that we approach reading the 7 gifts?
I would only say this, to keep an open mind to one thought, and that is the idea that it could in fact be possible to understand all of humanity. And that's a big one. But
that is a big one. I like the way in the book you gave examples of who possessed which gift during the pandemic. The people that were really in the forefront of it, and I won't give away anything because I thought that was really interesting. And I always like real life application. It's a little bit easier for people to understand. So, David, do you have plans for another book?
I don't. That was a very big project because of all the careful, fragile illustrations and drawings and photographs. All the hardbacks are handmade. The book itself, hopefully, is also a work of art. But it was something that took a great amount of time and diligence and care I'll never write another book again. However, it is, as you know, a set of ideas and a topic that I can build horizontally with. I don't need to build another vertical structure regarding the gifts, but I can build with it horizontally through the website, through talks, through discussing the information and getting it out. One thing, as you recall from the book, that I argue is that, frequently the biggest lies are the easiest to conceal.
Yes.
Fundamental flaws in systems that are around us, et cetera. But as a parallel to that, I do believe that sometimes the biggest truths are also the most difficult to see. And I would argue that, as I did in the book, that if anybody would understand this, Darwin would. Darwin would have understood what the 7 gifts really represent and the implications that those gifts have for the survival of our species. I think it's that basic and that fundamental.
In closing, David, how do you hope the 7 gifts will impact readers' lives?
I hope that it draws the world out of the virtual world and into the world of authenticity, into the world of being able to connect to people. Every time that I talk to people about the gifts in the book, they get very excited. Well, who am I? What's my gift? And then what's your gift? And we can talk about that. And it's a way of seeing inside of one another and loving one another and connecting with one another and working through issues and working through difficulties and understanding that our gifts are different. And it's important to understand the differences as a means of connecting and loving one another.
Well, David, thank you for sharing these 7 gifts with us. I know it has definitely impacted my life, and I'm eager to share it with my family and friends. Tell us again, how can readers learn more about you and take the gifts quiz?
You can go to the website of the book, www.7gifts.com. That's spelled out. There's resources that we're building. I just finished producing 7 individual gift videos, so that, for example, if somebody wanted to see what the prophet gift was, there's a nice summary of that as well. And we're going to continue to build out resources like that in the future. There's a way to email me from that site. I love feedback. I'd love honest feedback and would be happy to communicate with anybody about these subjects.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, David. This is Gabby Olzak of The Gab.
Thank you, Gabby.